love writing because I love the escapism aspect. And then my mom very, keenly phrased it the other day, which, how moms kind of can say something that you're like is true, but you're like, oh, I never thought about. She said that she thinks that I write to basically cope with life. And I think that is true. For I question myself so many times, but I think there was a time maybe when I could have turned away from it, if I'd gone to something else in high school. But having written my first book at 12 and kind of not really stopped writing since, it was, what else am I going to do?
You're listening to Lemon's Listening Library. Discover the story behind the stories with unique and raw conversations from the people who make your favorite books a reality. All right, welcome to this episode of Lemon's Listening Library. I'm Randy Lemons, fantasy author, or RL Rose to those of you in the romance community. Today we have an amazing guest that I cannot wait to introduce to you, but first, as always, the boring housekeeping. Wah, wah, wah. All right, I would like to remind our listeners to head over to our YouTube channel, comment on each episode that you listen to, or review us on your chosen podcast platform. We are on all of them. It is the most helpful way that you can support our show with doing the least amount of effort, and it helps in such an impactful way. We also have some advertising spots available where we create commercials and broadcast them across all of our platforms, as well as give the commercials to you to use however you see fit. If you'd like more information on this, just email us at lemonslisteninglibrary@gmail.com and we'll get you hooked up with all the information on that. Lastly, go follow us on all of our social media platforms. Again, you can find us on all of them by searching at Lemon's Listening Library. All right, the moment you guys have been waiting for. I would like to introduce our guest today. Would you please introduce yourselves to our listeners?
Hi, I'm Katelynsam. I am a fantasy author and I've been working to get published and writing for over a decade now. So I'm just recently published my debut novel, The Fated. So my dream has finally come true and I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me here, Andy.
Yeah, of course.
Thank
Congratulations.
you.
How does
Thanks.
it feel? And you've been at this for a while now, right?
Right, right. I wrote my first book at 12. Didn't finish it, it was just in a notebook. And I guess at that time I didn't realize that the author can change the ending of the story. And so I saw a
Yeah.
story. I didn't like the ending because it was weirdly like a sad-ish, bittersweet ending even at 12. I was like, I don't like this. And I wrote a few others, didn't finish them, in notebooks in middle school and things. I completed my first novel at 15, and that's when I immediately kind of wanted to get it published. So that's when I immediately started querying. And so that began my long journey of querying. I think I remember that first book. I did get like a partial, I think, request from an agent, so it was, that initial like, oh my
Yay!
gosh. And several
They're
books after that, I
interested.
didn't. Yeah, I mean, they passed, and then several books out I wrote after that didn't actually get partial. So I was like, have I regressed? But so I wrote several books, throughout the years, tried to get them queried, and it took me years to finally get an agent, and they two agents actually, but now it's to finally see it published. I've been able to hold it in my hands. I just like I have it right here, so just kind of
Woo!
showing it off
Yes.
here. But it was like a dream come true, but also it's just kind of I'm just trying to enjoy all the first experiences right now. So yeah, it's definitely a surreal, and yeah.
Yeah. You've made it to the area that a
Yeah.
lot of authors are like, my dream is to just be published. And they don't have anything beyond that. It's just they want to get their
Oh,
book
really?
published. And they're like, beyond that, we'll see what happens. But I just wanted someone to pick it up. And then a lot of people just kind of get stuck in the querying trenches. They don't move forward or they don't do revisions to see like what is it that's causing them not to look at my book. And you did it.
Right.
You made it to where so many people want to be.
Thank
Congratulations.
you. Yeah, I
Yeah.
will say having all the rejections over the years, it was brutal and it definitely, was tough, but it definitely, I think, was a kind of an odd way for me to, like, in a way, get feedback. And so it did, I think, make my writing definitely better, just those because it was definitely hundreds of rejections. And so it definitely they weren't wasted, every rejection counted, I'd like to think.
Yeah, I think that there is a skill with that you can learn from accepting criticism, from accepting rejections. There's a skill to being able to turn that into a positive thing.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree too. I mean, I would say one thing I think have learned is that when you get a bunch of feedback from a bunch of agents and it's all different, like some of them love one thing that is the very thing that other agents hate, and it's all over the place at that point. I mean, I think sometimes it may just be kind of different, because that's what the Faded originally had whenever I was working with those agents. He worked very hard to revise that. But I will say, when multiple agents kind of say the same thing or similar things, that's when maybe there is more of a something to work on versus again, if it's just kind of everywhere, I think then maybe it's just there's an opening in the market that instead of there being something, definitely wrong with this, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah, nope, I agree. I think that's where the skill comes into place is learning where it's other people's opinions and other people's cups of teas and where it's like, okay, there might actually be something I need to redo on this
Hmm.
manuscript.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And then there's a skill in just being able to kind of absorb that, and because I'm like all writers and get immediately I'm like, my mind's like, but I did this because of this, and you get a little defensive, which is totally normal. So it's just definitely a skill of kind of being able to take a step back and then kind of hear that feedback again and be like, oh, I agree with this, and some of it you don't, agree with, but some of it you can give on and be like, oh, I could add a scene there, could add a little more here.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So what was it that kind of drew you into storytelling at such a young age?
I would say I just love reading. I was a big reader. I mean, part of the reason now I have such kind of I need really thick glasses is because I
Mine are
read
so bad.
so yeah, I mean it's because I read, fantasy, which is my first love, especially throughout I would say middle school to the point where I was reading in bed with a flashlight, which I'm pretty sure that's what caused some of the eye strain, to where my mom would like come in because she would know she like had a feeling that I would be reading something, and then I would be like stuffing the book under the pillow. And they were, it was like, I think at one time, one of the books I read was I love Cassandra Clare's like Infernal Devices series, and I think when the second or third one came out, like I bought it on a Tuesday because that was the release date, and then I like read through it, by the pillow until like 3 a.m. and I had to go to high school, like, wake up at 7 or I had to get there by 8, and it was like I was a zombie that day, but it was so worth it because I can't go through books like that now. I'm like, I need
Yeah.
sleep. I can't just, yeah.
I did that with the Aragon series whenever I think it
Oh
was
yeah. I think I might
uh
have done that too. Like that
yeah,
was such a
yeah.
big series.
I think when Inheritance came out, that was the one that was like
Mhm.
it dropped at midnight, and that was the first time I'd ever had a Kindle to where I could order it and get it as soon
Oh,
as it dropped.
nice.
And yeah, I stayed up all night
Oh.
reading that.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I remember reading one of those books, I think, like during a football game, and it was
Yeah.
like people were screaming in the stands around me, and I had this like the biggest because those are massive books. Just like
Mhm.
I was like, I don't have that focus now.
Yeah, yeah. No, I still could zone out. Oh my gosh. I think that's a part of having kids is like there is a skill with I'm just going to keep saying skill through this whole podcast, I guess. There is a skill with being able to have kids and just still in the moment of the chaos and all the stuff going
Hmm.
on, you can just kind of check out and read it like without being interrupted with their screaming and
Oh
playing
yeah.
and whatnot. But yeah, I'm glad I
Oh
haven't
yeah, that
lost
would
that
be a
ability.
skill, definitely.
Yeah, yeah. So you, like you said before, you've been writing for a while. What was it? Is there anything that has really changed with your approach to writing since you first published to or first started writing till now?
I would say a lot. I mean, on on one hand, it was getting all those rejections, like I said, really um it did provide feedback. And then also I think, I had dreams when I was 12 of, being published and things like that, but writing is one of those careers that actually I feel like as you age and gain more experience in life, and you're observant, I think all writers are kind of naturally observant. That's why we if we were out there maybe in the middle of the action and everything, we wouldn't be drawn to, dissecting it and writing it and things like that. I think just the experiences I had, changed that too. Really loved growing up. I really loved the medieval fantasy like Lord of the Rings, and I watched that BBC show Merlin and all of those, and I still love those.
Oh my,
But
oh, I remember Merlin. That was so
yes, it
good.
was like bromance, and Arthur was
Yeah.
like never like Merlin could be like like sparks would be flying, and like Arthur suddenly didn't see it, and then Morgana was like smirking all over the place, and it was like, how does Arthur not see it? It was like hilarious, but I love that show.
Oh my gosh,
So
I'm gonna have to.
and
I seriously need to put that down and have my husband watch that because that was that. I need to see what he thinks of that.
yeah, between the Merlin TV series and the Sam Neill, I think Merlin. Did you ever watch those longer movie? Like there's a first movie that had a part one and part two because they were like long like TV movies.
Yeah.
And then they had like a sequel that is never reshown, but I actually thought it was pretty good where he had an apprentice, and I was like, this is. But anyway, I loved the kind of medieval Western, stuff so much. Looking back at some of my earlier work, it like, have you ever seen where it's like especially when you're first starting writing, whatever inspires you is reflected a little too much in your
Oh yeah.
work? Because I wrote something that it wasn't, it definitely wasn't exactly like Lord of the Rings. It was contemporary and things like that. But when I read it, I was like, oh, this is my Lord of the Rings phase
Yeah.
and things. And then, I went to college and like I discovered Korean and Chinese dramas, which I still love to this day. And I will say they just have a different way of storytelling. So I think honestly that has helped my writing too of, I still, a lot of my work is kind of a mixture of Western fantasy and then, Asian fantasy that I've, watched from those. And it's just a kind of different way, beautifully cinematic. And I think that was definitely a shift in my writing of, you know, influences. So now you kind of see that where it's that kind of mixture. So it's not like, oh, this is very medieval Lord of the Rings fantasy. It's kind of I would say a combination. But yeah, I would say that. And then I also interned at some literary agencies too. So that gave me, as an intern, I was basically doing book reports. I was looking at potential clients' work and their existing clients' work and literally writing a report of quotes I liked, things that, could be improved upon, things I did like. So that really helped too, just understanding publishing more.
That's so cool. So you kind of
Right.
know the back end of like the acceptance and the querying process, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Happy to discuss that too. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that, I mean, yeah, we can dive into that because that is definitely something that is interesting for a lot of people. Where, as we're querying, we don't see behind the curtains. We don't see all the effort it
Hmm.
takes or how many queries they get, like, and then what the process is. How far do they read before they realize it's not something they're interested in, or what they're looking at? There's so much that goes into the back end. It's not just, no, I don't want your book."
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And then, yeah, and also since I hear now there's just more and more writers kind of filling all those queries. But I think another thing that I will say, kind of thinking about it, having to write so many queries that year has helped me really pitch. And I found at this point, now when I'm published, the skill of being able to pitch, to have an elevator pitch is so important, of just even when I'm reaching out to people I know and saying, hey, I wrote a book. I don't ever leave it on, hey, I wrote a book. I always give the elevator pitch or some kind of pitch, um, just to immediately, hopefully grab them. And so it immediately makes them, because when you say, I wrote a book and can you read it? It kind of, they're going to ask what it's about anyway. And then it's also, I mean, fewer people, a lot of people still read, but fewer people read. And so they're immediately kind of thinking like, oh, how long is it going to take? But if you give a pitch that's really, hooks them in, I think that eases psychologically some of the, oh, I have to read this because so and so is a friend versus, oh, I would actually, pick that up if I was browsing in a bookstore or looking at the book section in Target or something.
Yeah, yeah. Now, explain just really quickly what about an elevator pitch is to our listeners.
Yeah, sure. So an elevator pitch is now don't quote me this. I heard the other day from another podcast that supposedly the elevator pitch, I mean, I think widely known it generates from the film industry, but supposedly they said a pitch, like an elevator pitch, that term comes from when someone in a movie studio or production studio was trying to pitch an idea, he had to tell his boss or executive in such a short span of time that by the time they got in the elevator and then, went to whatever floor, the pitch was done. So basically the pitch is, I think usually for me it's kind of two-ish lines, one or two lines that basically sums up the setting in a handful of words, the plot, and like basically kind of the stakes. So, for example, Faded, it's about every 16 years, this mysterious ship appears at the docks, supposedly taking people to paradise. And the second sentence is, but when one woman gets a ticket to the ship and people start going missing, which makes her, start going on adventure to see, to wonder if the paradise is actually taking them to paradise at all, and if not, then where is it taking them? So that immediately, hopefully, kind of sets up the setting of, there's mystery, there's a ship, it's a nautical setting, but also there's immediately, it's luxurious, but something is immediately wrong, and then there's a quest or journey to see the mystery behind the ship. So it immediately sets up the stakes too.
Yeah. I loved listening to the little excerpt that you did whenever we did the L3
Oh,
live events.
thanks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was, and then the book cover, the way that you have the book cover and the ships, like at first you don't really see it, and then when you look
Mhm.
at it, you can see it, and especially I imagine after you read the whole book and then you look back at the book cover, it has a whole other meaning.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's definitely, I was brainstorming what, you know, it should look like and everything, but I wanted to, the lettering was definitely, I guess maybe I should like hold it up as an example, but the text was like I wanted to be very kind of gilded like 1920s-ish versus, it's obviously reversible. It's like it kind of the fact that it's a ship at night with lightning and everything, and then, by day, it kind of, I think, I was hoping it would feed into the idea of, on one hand, it's like blue skies and it's great, but there's an undercurrent of something else, and you're not really sure what that something else is until, the end. So.
Yeah. I don't know, and this doesn't, Spirited Away doesn't even have ships on it, but like this, have you ever seen Spirited Away?
Oh, I love Spirited Away. And people said that, which is interesting because out of all my projects, I have future projects planned, I seriously think this one is like the least like Studio Ghibli, and yet people already say, like multiple people have already said, like one of the agents I once created was like, I felt like I think she said Spirited Away too, and I was like, well, what are you all gonna think for my next ones that are like, I consciously like wasn't like very way more, I guess, Studio Ghibli-esque.
Yeah, yeah. No, and particularly the scene where the spirits are coming off the ship and like right. I don't know why I keep every time we talk about this book, that's the about the image that I get is that little moment when the spirits are coming off the ship.
Oh yeah. No, I love that. I love that marketplace scene too. That's
Oh
again,
my
maybe
gosh.
I just love the music, and with my I wrote a short story too this year too called Last Masquerade at the Carousel House. And I think, I wasn't trying to go with the same or similar themes as the Faded, but I guess I'm just really drawn to luxurious and fantastical settings that, have a surface of being very beautiful, and ornate, but have like an undercurrent of something a little more sinister. And I guess I just love that, exploring that contrast and things like that. It can't
Yeah.
just be, I guess, all rainbows and and
Yeah.
blue sky.
I like that about books though. I enjoy
Mhm,
books that it's not like okay, I think I have to be in the mood, right? If I'm in the mood to
mhm.
have all rainbows and whatnot, but I often the books that stick with me and it's not just a palate cleanser book are the books that are like real gritty and real life and it's not, it makes me connect with it on such a deeper level because I can see so many aspects of real life in that book and I can
Mhm.
relate to it. And I think a lot of palate cleanser books that are just the happy endings, the everyone gets what they want kind of thing. Those ones don't stick with you as often.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that's true. I mean, I enjoy reading some of those cozy fantasy, that kind of new cozy fantasy genre, but it doesn't, my mind. and focus tends to wander more. And I've noticed that
Mhm.
for TV shows too, and I think, you know, I personally get scared easily, so I'm not drawn to like horror specifically, but I do know, this book has elements of like darker, themes. So I guess it's also just all about holding attention to because if everything's going too fine, if there's no drama, I mean, I think that's why people love reality TV. They want to see, like, if
Yeah.
everyone is getting along in reality TV and there's no drama, I guess it's on brand. I love watching Below Deck, so I'm like, I like some drama. So I guess it must be something that's part of entertainment.
Yeah, me and my husband joke all the time about how often we hate the main characters. Like, it's like, why are you so dumb? Why did you make that
Oh,
choice?
in
Why
reality
are you
TV?
Yeah. No, 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 just books. Like
Oh,
in
okay.
general, often in the fantasy world or the made up worlds, we don't like the main characters because
Oh,
they're traumatic. They're not making the smart choices. They're going into the dark
right.
alleys. They're doing all the dumb stuff. And it's like, why are you so but obviously if they had a good head on their shoulders, if they didn't do the dangerous missions, we wouldn't have stories. We wouldn't have the level of
Right.
stories that we do. Uh,
Yeah, and I think it's definitely a balance though as a writer too, because there's something fantastical about it where they have to make a decision to move the plot, but sometimes you don't want it again to be like you were just touching on too obvious of any reasonable person wouldn't go into the dark alley, but Sally on this day decides to just wander in there. I mean, it's definitely kind of a balancing act to kind of make that, I guess, more believable if she has a reason to go in the dark alley or something.
right. Yeah. 100%. And like from the reader standpoint, often it looks like there's no reason, right? But from the
Oh,
author's
yeah.
standpoint, we've got their back floor story fleshed out. We have their motivation. We know why today they were also a little cranky and they did this, this, and this. And so that's what pushed them over the edge that day.
Right.
And, but,
Yeah, and
yeah.
that's something that the agents I worked with really helped me with. Ultimately we didn't sell, but I will say from both my agents or groups of agents, they were very, I think, good editors. So they were good about leaving like a comment and track changes in an instance there where, saying to add one or two sentence about, reminding the reader why Sally wants to go in that dark alley, versus, oh, she just made a left and decided to keep going.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's so fun. It's interesting how we as authors can see where it's going. We know what we want to happen. We know what the characters are going to decide, but sometimes we don't convey that the way we want to our readers and they're missing on things that we expect them to pick up, and I think having the feedback like you said is so important.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, because I think it's understandable because as authors, our job is to see the big picture and do our best we can to connect those details, but obviously we're all human. It's going to just slip in some instances, and it can be you just understand the character so much. It's almost like knowing someone so well that you know what they're going to say, you know what they're going to do, whereas someone else in the make group would maybe like, how do you know that? And so that's kind of how the reader is of, we understand why the character does something, but the reader may not. And I think and it's also really fun when you know the characters so much they kind of have a voice of their own. I'm not sure for you,
Gosh.
do they do this as well? Because yesterday I was like trying to put them and to do something, and I literally heard a voice kind of being like, "No, I think I kind of want to stay in Sims."
So I'm an outliner. I very often outline my entire books. Like I have
Oh,
5 books that
nice.
are outlined and ready to go for the rest of this year. So I already
Oh,
know what my
wow.
yeah. But what happens often for me is the character develops and I get through like the first draft and I go back through and I'm like knowing what the character was like by the end of the book. As I go through my second
Mhm.
draft, it is very clear like okay, this character would not do this, this character because of their
Oh, okay.
behavior or I can enhance things, yes they would do this but they would do it at a higher level, they really don't like
Okay.
this. And it really makes it to where it is driven by the character, and sometimes I'll get to plots or ideas that I had outlined and I'm like, this does not fit at all. Like I will just have to completely scrap the entire situation because the character's development is still so important even through outlining. Like you have an idea of how you want the story to go, but as you develop this character, it might not always fit that way.
Right, right. Well, great on you for being an outliner. I mean, I guess I assume that makes the writing, the drafting faster. That's why you
So
outline, you can probably get them out quicker.
yeah, and I think what happens a lot of times is with outliners or pantsers, you're either going to spend a lot of time up front or you're going to spend a lot of time on the back end. So like with
Hmm.
outliners, we spend a lot of time on up front. So we spend a lot of time developing everything and then making sure it all fits together. Whereas pantsers, they spend a lot of time at the end trying to figure out how to connect all their threads together.
Yeah, yeah, I've heard both of those terms recently. I didn't realize there were terms for each, but it totally fits. I'm kind of a mixture of I've gotten to where I do very vague outlines now, until I know the ending 50 pages in, so I can write toward that ending. But I can't like I mean, I think the most I did was when I was with an agent, I had a sequel planned and I wasn't sure in the submission process, so I like wrote the 50 pages and I thought we had to have an outline to sell a duology. Um, so that's when I wrote it because I thought it was required and apparently it was like this is but
Yeah.
I'm planning on releasing that series, in a few years, so it's not like a waste or anything. But
Mhm.
that was the most, and it was like bullet points, probably nothing like your outlines. It was like bullet points, and even then, it was very vague, and I just can't. I think it's better for me if I do some just write like drafting of the first few chapters and then do the outline, because I can't just have a blank page and then just start outlining. I'm like,
Yeah.
it's kind of a mixture.
Stephen King's the same way. So Stephen King, he will not outline his stuff. He's like,
Oh, okay.
I think he even said in one interview that he likes to be just as surprised as the readers. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that sounds like anxiety filled. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah, nope, that just stresses me out. But I love that that's his process, and that's a lot of writers' processes of just like, I don't know what's gonna happen.
Oh, wow. I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, I guess so. He doesn't know the like. Is that he really doesn't know the ending till the end. I'm not that level of I kind of
Yeah,
have to know what I'm writing towards, and I know it's more like I know big kind of either points or emotional points, and it's more I'm not sure how we're going to get there
yeah,
versus a total like was it almost like a stream of consciousness of oh my gosh like
yeah.
the what a that would cause me anxiety too.
Yeah. Yeah, I talked to another person on the podcast and they were talking about how he knows someone who writes a murder mystery. And I'm
Mhm.
like, "Okay, you would think with murder mystery they do have like the whole." And she's like,
Right.
"Nope, I just start with a dead body." And I'm like, "Oh my god."
I
How
wonder if she goes
stressful.
back and like sprinkles in all the clues or something, or I don't know how you would, unless I guess your mind can just click it all together. But I mean,
Yeah.
I had some instances in the Faded where, because it's mystery-ish, where, it was kind of hinting, and some of my ARC readers, I guess, it's a great compliment. Some of my ARC readers have gone back to read because they wanted to see the foreshadowing and things like that. But those were put in during revisions. I mean,
Mhm.
maybe a few during drafting, where just, I know I'm going to do something here, so I added a little shadowing, but, a lot of it, you don't know, like, you really don't know until it's actually the first draft is finished. So that's when, I'm going back and adding that stuff. But yeah, that's a whole skill of being able to just go totally linear
Yeah,
and
I
for a
see most of
mystery, for a
most
puzzle.
I know, yeah. Yeah, that one blew my mind. And most of my writing, like you said, comes from my like my revision.
Hmm.
That's where the foreshadowing gets dropped in. That's where
Right.
everything kind of gets all the loose ends get tied back up. Yeah, I they blow my mind. I think people like that are fantastic.
Yeah, and it's definitely interesting just throughout this conversation of just how many different approaches people have to writing. Because no, I feel like nobody actually does it the exact same, no matter how many classes you take. I mean, it's just because it is so creative. It's not something that you clearly go from A to B. I've heard some authors, they just write pivotal scenes or scenes they're interested. and then piece them together. And to me, I mean, that's cool because there are some scenes that are less fun to write than others, but
Yeah.
I feel like I would lose all sense of like what I'm supposed to get done this week. And then it's like if you write all the great scenes, then does that mean all like the scenes in between are like less great and then you're stuck writing that for a month? I don't
Yeah,
understand. I was
yeah,
like, I
I'm right
don't
there with you.
understand.
That's like my motivation to get through the rough scenes is like I know what's
Right,
coming next.
right. Yeah, so I don't know. I feel like that'd be kind of yeah, I'm an admiration, but that'd be terrifying to just write all your best scene, your most intense scenes, and
Yeah.
then just find a way to like knit them together would be like I think that'd be too much for me.
And I feel like I would forget, like, oh, I already told that. And then going backwards, like, I feel like
Mhm.
I would put things in there that I actually already told in the future, but then I'm sprinkling it in the beginning. It's like, wait, they're not supposed to know this information yet. It would mess me
Yeah.
up so bad.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things, maybe I've had the time to play with it, but it's like I think because I've established kind of my process now, someday maybe, but I'm just kind of like would be afraid to like fiddle and mess with that and
Yeah.
then get kind of a mess at the end.
I love that you've starting to get your routine down. I think that that is really where I started to feel like an author was when I started to have my routine down and started to
Hmm.
figure out what my process looked like. Because there for a
Yeah.
while, like when people would talk about theirs, I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. That sounds awesome. I'm gonna take that advice. I'm gonna take that advice.
Hmm.
And I was like taking all of these things and it just felt a little overwhelming. And now I know my
Right.
process enough to where I can be like, no, actually, that doesn't work for me. I probably wouldn't do something like that because I've tried it
Right.
and I know that that stresses me out.
And it's also, a great confidence thing of, you figured out what works and what doesn't. So you're kind of past that stage, regardless if you're published or not. There are certain stages, and I have a friend who's just starting to write. She may not even pursue publishing, just she just wants to write. So she's still in that phase of doing classes, and it's all very new. And like, how do you even plot or write a book and things like that, which is you know definitely super daunting. And she's reading all the books and everything, and it's at least I would say, my time working with the agents as interns or being, a client of them and seeing the publishing industry has, kind of surpassed that stage. And it's only recently too with the move to self-publish and everything that I've realized how much I've learned from, my professional career as well as my writing career and how much that's suddenly kind of all, it was like over a decade of me still like not knowing if I would ever be published and just learning everything that now I'm suddenly realizing, oh, like I have gained expertise, I have gained experience, and I know, I follow the publishing news now too and kind of have an insight into more than I would if I was like just starting out and like what is publishing? But yeah, it's a super tough industry now, especially for people starting out. I mean,
Yeah.
self-publishing is definitely, talking about schedules. It definitely is more packed between the writing and the publishing and then just the marketing and everything is like a whole, like I'm more busy, but I would say, sometimes at least it's all I like to think somewhat within my control. I can decide where I want to go versus, for years, I was with agents or querying agents basically in a state of waiting and then
Mm.
usually disappointing news. And that was not great. I learned a lot, but I was definitely, felt more powerless, understandably. And I hear, even established authors who are published feel that now with publishing because it's just so, there's very kind of less power given to the writer, I think, than a lot of people would have immediately kind of understand.
Yeah. So, what was it that you having all of that rejection just mount up on you,
Mhm.
and then having them be interested in your book, pick up your book, and then it still not go the traditional route? What was it that kept you from just feeling overwhelmingly defeated from that and just giving up?
I think I did feel multiple times overwhelmingly defeated. I think one of these things, I love writing because I love the escapism aspect. And then my mom very, keenly phrased it the other day, which, how moms kind of can say something that you're like is true, but you're like, oh, I never thought about she said that she thinks that I write to basically cope with life. And I think that is true. For I question myself so many times, but I think there was a time maybe when I could have turned away from it, if I'd gone to something else in high school. But having written my first book at 12 and kind of not really stopped writing since, it was, what else am I going to do? And I would, tell myself I would stop writing and I would go maybe a week or so without writing and not having a project, a long-term project to work on, words to say at the end of the day. I felt very directionless. So actually it was, you know, in some ways is a way like I don't keep a diary except, I have like a newsletter that's like a dear writing diary blog thing, but I don't journal my individual days. So I think, when I'm writing, it's just again, I think my mom was right, and it's kind of how I cope with life. If work's been stressful lately, it actually does give good motivation to write more. Um, so it's just, and I think it's interesting because all of my books, when I go back, obviously they're fantastical in theme and things like that, but I can tell what stage I was at. Um,
Mm.
you know, but the Faded was kind of a darker period, but I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. Well, I knew I wanted to write. It's one of those things. I guess I've always known I wanted to write, but having to to be able to financially support yourself solely with writing is like a whole nother dream in itself. And that was my dream. So, and like I wasn't sure what kind of, real job I was going to get. So it was like very stressful. So that's where kind of that darker theme in, The Faded comes from. And, the ending for those who see, that's kind of really what it's talking about. And so I guess it was just, it's how I cope with life. And I just couldn't stop without it. Even if when I wasn't being published, it felt very like, what am I doing at night? I felt very voiceless. It was just, I guess it's one of those things that it's too late for me to turn back now. It's me and writing have
I
kind of
think you
become
found
one
your
and the same.
passion. Like
Yeah,
that's how I feel. Like I think I could probably try to walk away from writing, and every time I do, I would come back. Like I think it's one of
right.
those things that I just, even if I try, even if I think there's another direction for me, I think I would always find myself back in writing.
Mhm.
It's my passion, it's my place, it's where I get the most excited to,
Right.
experience life through these other characters. And yeah, I'm right there with you. It's definitely
Yeah.
how I enjoy living my life at knowing I'm writing other stories.
Yeah, me too. I mean, and I like the long-term aspect of it, since you outline, maybe you write faster than I do, but I usually it was like kind of a book a year. So I actually liked being able to like, work on something, chip away at something kind of bigger every day for a little bit. And then it become this beautiful thing in different stages. It was like very fulfilling. Even with my graphic design, I mean, that process is like I'm still new at it. So seriously, like the very first beginning, I'm like drawing and I'm like, I don't really know how this is going to turn out. It kind of, because it's a mess. I mean, I definitely need to practice more because I don't go about it the way professionals do. So the beginning, it's like it's that one is more like there's a bunch of dots and how am I going to put together? But then when it does come together, I'm really feel very fulfilled and things like that. So yeah, I think speaking of Stephen King, I read his book on writing, and I think he mentioned in that one how for every writer there is kind of a point of no return when you really could quit, and a lot of people do. And then, more so than all the other, everyday kind of struggles. Because he was saying that at one point, I think he was still writing and he wasn't getting published, and his wife was the one supporting the family. And he said at that point, if his wife had asked him to stop writing, then he would have for the family and everything. But she didn't. She was the voice that I think forget which book she really believed in, but she was the voice that told him to keep writing, and then it seems to have turned a corner, and that's kind of when it took off.
Yeah. Yeah, I think support systems are I think that there's definitely a way to get through life and still be a writer without the support systems. It's just gonna you might fall
That'd
off
be
a lot
tough.
more.
That'd be
Yeah.
very tough. Yeah.
Yeah, you might fall off a lot more and eventually come back to it, and it might be a very stretched out and longer process. I think having the support systems make it to where you're not falling off as much. You're able to stick with it, and it doesn't feel like a burden, right? I feel like if I didn't have a support
Right.
system, writing would turn into more of a burden or like a something I have to hide. You know what I mean? Like something that if my
Right.
husband didn't support me, I wouldn't let him know, "Hey, I'm gonna go write." I'd be like,
Hmm.
"Hey, I'm gonna go do some work on my real job." And then
Right,
write.
right. Yeah, and then I was, very lucky with my, parents being really supportive. My mom always, she still to this day is my first person who I send, the first draft to and everything. So I was very lucky in that regard. But they did also instill with me like, I had to get a day job basically. And I will say, having a day job, I mean, it makes it way more tough. And sometimes, I do have days of like, because I feel like I'm working two jobs, especially with the
Oh,
publishing now.
100%.
I have days of, why can't I just be like my normal, like the job I love be the 9 to 5, and that's great. But I think, one thing I'm learning is for self-publishing, there's so many expenses. And so that would, in a way, if I just did that and that was supposed to pay the bills, that would be a whole new kind of stress.
Oh, yeah.
That's, I had no idea how much work and expenses go into
Yeah.
self-publishing. And I'm trying to do, a budgeted version. I'm not even trying to do the like really fancy, editions yet or things like that because
Right.
I'm just
What
starting
tier of
out.
self-publishing are you doing? I'm doing the I can
Yeah.
afford it tier.
Yeah, because some of the, especially on Instagram, like you see all the social media, you see all some of the ones take off, and with the really fancy editions, and they hire, I think like marketing firms now. Have you seen on Instagram where it's like, yeah, I mean they just take the beautiful pictures and all this stuff, and I'm like, how,
Yeah.
like how
You
do
pay
you?
for a photo session for your book. Like, I need one for me
Yeah,
first. I need let's start there.
yeah, I mean, I've seen that Kickstarter is good for that, but I was listening to a podcast by Brandon Sanderson, and he was saying, for his Kickstarter, and he has a team of people. He's like, for Kickstarters, you don't realize how much organizing goes into that and how much all of that stuff. So yes, you get money up front, but I'm like, that would be a whole new stress of,
Oh yeah. Now you have these
yeah,
people who are invested in you. They feel like your
they're
work is
expecting
also
something.
yeah.
Yeah, I was too afraid to even do the pre-orders for Amazon because I'd heard there were some glitches. So like I was like, release day, my worst nightmare for release day would be to have like 20 people angrily message me because their book, because I had heard that. I don't know, have you heard
Yeah.
that of
A day that
glitches?
you're supposed to have, happiness and joy and excitement, and then you get all these angry letters. Yeah, that would be very defeating, especially your
Yeah,
first one, right? Because then it would be almost a
right.
traumatic experience for your next one that
Mhm.
comes out.
Yeah, I mean, I heard MK Williams, she's great at, she has a YouTube channel that she really, for any writers out there, check out her channel because she always breaks down like how you submit your book to Amazon and Ingram. So she really breaks down the technical aspects. She said, there were certain reasons why the pre-orders may not come through, but I'm just like, especially for my first time, I wanted to try to be as least stressful as
Yeah.
possible.
I get that. And like I said, you want to create moments that get you excited to do it again too. Like you
Right,
want to celebrate that finishing the first draft even. Go celebrate it. It doesn't matter how big or how
right.
small you do it. Just get excited for yourself because if you don't, no one else is going to.
Right. Yeah, I was trying to, yeah, just kind of make it a celebration week. And then also, especially again, since it was my first one, I don't want to, you know, have disgruntled customers from the very first work. I feel like maybe if that happens for your second or third one, or if you have an established fan base, they've seen your work. It's like a technical issue, but it's
Mhm.
also, especially when it involves payment, though, I'm like, I just
I
don't.
know.
I'm
Yeah.
like,
How
and it's
scary.
not in my control. Like, it's not like I'm selling direct. So it's not like, oh, I can just send you this.
Or
Yeah.
refund them. You have no control over any of that. Like
And it's especially since it's Amazon, I was like, I
Mhm.
don't want to. I've heard there's self-publishing with Amazon. They can be very difficult to work with sometimes if you try to mess with anything. So I think maybe almost too conservative sometimes in my way that I handle Amazon right now, but I'm new, so maybe if I
Yeah.
In 5 years,
Get your
I'm like,
process figured out. You
I
got
know all the
this.
keyboard shortcuts, and I'm just like, I know all this. But right now, I'm like, I'm just not trying to do anything too risky.
Yeah, yeah. I love too that I did my book covers for my first book that I wrote too, and I think that there is a part to um the connection piece of like doing your own book cover design. Oh, it's not
Oh wow.
gonna
Ooh,
focus. Ooh, oh well.
ooh.
Wow.
I do
So,
like the border though, and
oh,
I see a
it's my
little bit
there
of
it
it
goes, there it
now.
goes.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, there.
Why is my blur
Nice.
thing being so funny? Yeah. But it was a process, and it was like I feel so much more connected to this book because every aspect of it, I had a piece going into it. It wasn't,
Right.
like I paid someone else to do the book cover and I paid someone else to do the formatting and I paid someone else to do,
Mhm.
this entire book, besides the printing of it, was something that I had a hand in.
Right. Yeah, and it's so rewarding, and it's also a skill that, opens it up versus paying someone like, 500 every time. And just the fact of paying all these people, I'm like, maybe I can learn skills, but also save, you know, cut back on expenses. So there's two
Mhm.
kind of things there, but it really has, yeah, given me an understanding, of the whole process. And then with the graphic design, I'm trying to still practice that when I have time. And so I'm actually planning on releasing some novellas that hopefully would have artwork, trying to
Oh, so
format artwork in
exciting.
there. Like that's going to be a new thing, but I'm hoping, because apparently that's definitely trending. I've seen some
Oh, yes.
novellas and like anthologies now with artwork and things like that. So if that's something I can break into, it just kind of expands the skill set and stuff.
I know my thing's gonna blur on this too, but I got a book the other day from one of my people who are on the show, and she does bookmarks
Oh.
for hers.
Oh,
And I
nice.
think that that is, and they've even got like little like parts of the
Oh,
books on the back, and oh, so
that's
so
so
smart.
cool. Or is
Yeah.
artwork in the book too? Do you know,
No,
or
I
is it
don't
part of
think
the
so.
cover? Oh.
Yep. Nope. I don't see any artwork in the actual book
Mhm.
itself that I've looked through so far. Like she's got a map, but that's about it.
Oh, okay, nice. Yeah, I connected with a writer on Substack who actually, I think, prints her books for KDP because she likes them better. And then she has like 40, you know, pieces of art in there, sometimes small, images, sometimes, full page lengths. But then I think she has her own shop on Etsy. So then she resells them, she signs them, and she has bookmarks. And so she sells them on Etsy at a higher price than the Amazon price. But I was like, wow, kind of opened my mind of this whole self-publishing thing is definitely, if you just look on Instagram and you kind of look online of like the entrepreneurial side of writers
Mhm.
and how creative people are, because it's interesting because for the longest time, I'm not sure if you've heard this, like I felt there was almost like a stigma or an understanding of like the artist being so artsy that they couldn't understand business
Oh
or
yeah.
things like that, and hence which is why they needed managers and needed agents and needed all these other like business people to
Well, I think
manage
sometimes it just
them.
kills the creative process. Like I think if you get
Yeah,
too
I mean it
if you get
can. Yeah.
yeah, and so I think there's definitely an importance to hiring other people to do these things for you.
Mhm.
If you listen to yourself, right? If you can manage all of
Right.
this and you're not getting burnt out and you're still enjoying what you're doing, then yeah, learn the new skill. It's super fun,
Right.
and it's also sometimes like that's a whole new art aspect. Book cover designs. That
Yeah.
is completely new art right there. Um but if it is burning you out and you are like, I can't even get to the story because I'm doing all these other things, writer's job is to write. And if you're not
Right.
doing your main job, you probably need some help.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think I have thought about like all this time I'm spending with the marketing and everything. I could be writing and things like that. I do think though, right now, I'm happy with where I'm at because I do like being able to learn kind of each process so that if someday I do outsource it, you'll know what it is versus it being some kind of mystical thing that you've never done yourself. Because I think it's almost easier to get experience doing it when you're kind of at the very beginning than
Mhm.
20 years down the road you suddenly, have to do your own cover, and
Yeah.
it's also the stakes are low when I feel like when you're beginning to, I mean, you don't have 20,000 people being like, oh, this cover is of lower quality than
Yeah.
the other.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, that would be, but I designed this one personally.
Yeah,
Ouch.
it wouldn't, I feel like or so the beginning, it's kind of at the beginning you can only go up. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. So you also mentioned about how supportive the book community has been. So what does that look like, and what role has they played in keeping you motivated?
Yeah, I would say all these, my friends have been supportive, but specifically people who I've met on Instagram, and then Substack is a great community. Just everyone there is pretty much a writer of some sort, even if they're, writing more just daily kind of happenings. And they've been super supportive on just any questions I have, but also just anything about writing. I can sometimes, I guess, what it's almost sometimes their notes is almost like Twitter used to be. You can kind of just like basically post a little note about the day. And I've been able to post just things, kind of quirky things about writing that I feel like other people won't understand, but writers do. So that's been great just bonding with them. And they've been really supportive of if I'm frustrated about something or it's like, oh, this isn't successful. And they're like, calm down, it's fine. This has happened to us. And then Instagram's where I received the majority of my ARC readers too. And, even the people who aren't ARC readers are super supportive. But my ARC readers have definitely mostly been through Instagram, and it's just been great. While they were reading, some of them are reaching out to me, giving me live reactions to the books, and someone reached out to me the other day and they're like, this just happened. I suspect this person, and I think this is going to happen. And it was totally off base. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, I can't wait for you to find it. But I think it's been great with them just, because for Instagram I've been on there for years. So I think a lot of them I feel like I started my Instagram around the time I got my first agent, and that was back in 2020. So they've kind of seen me vaguely post about publishing when I was trying to go the traditional way. Just suddenly, it's launching over the last year. I was posting about that, doing cover reveals and things like that. So they've been just super supportive. Um, and have helped me through processes too. Like one of them, she's super supportive of indie authors, and she's always, reading arcs from like everybody. And so when I was just figuring out how to even get arcs to people, I was, messaging her and asking her, how did the authors even send you this and things like that. And she was, you know, happy to help me and everything. And then she was one of my ARC readers, so it was, and then she was one of my ARC readers, but also ordered my book. She wants like the signed book plate and everything.
Oh,
So it was like,
that's
it's been
awesome.
great.
Those people are
Yeah.
irreplaceable.
Yeah. I mean, she's like the number one fan. I feel like she's that person in the stands, like, with the waving the number one finger or something for like all the indie authors, like front row seat. I'm
Got
just
her face
amazed by it.
painted and yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, she's like, because every day, like, I mean, every day it's like she's reading several different arcs, and I love it.
That's awesome. So I know we've kind of hinted a little bit here and there about what your book is about. So I imagine the listeners at this point are like, okay, come on, just lay it out for us.
Yeah, yeah, happy to dive in. That wasn't supposed to be a pun, but I guess.
Very punny. So
I
kind of
love
tell us a
puns.
little bit about The Fated.
Yeah, so kind of diving in more from that elevator pitch, the woman who gets the ticket, her name is Amara Obrell, and she once had a dream of being a concert pianist, but since that time, that dream just didn't turn out. So she's worked as an elevator operator, kind of living a mundane existence, not super fulfilled or happy with her life. But then she gets this, gold ticket to the Fated, which is again a luxurious ocean liner, think kind of Titanic style, but even more luxurious. And so she gets on this ship with her aunt and her cousin, but then people, despite all the endless, basically dinner parties and, majestic gardens and all this beautiful settings, then people start going missing on board. And so one of which is actually her cousin, Jasleen, goes missing. So that begins a journey of kind of searching on board for the missing people, but also, why are people going missing in this and this supposedly, perfect ship that's supposed to just bring them to paradise. And it begins kind of her I guess journey to uncover this mystery of, where is the ship actually taking them, if it's not taking them to paradise.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that I love the when you describe it, you hit it pretty accurately of like it's not necessarily a murder mystery, it's not necessarily a mystery. It's like this fantastical you don't know what's going to happen next.
Right. And I think that's one of its strengths too, is it's kind of cross genre. I guess you can't, even my ARC readers who, gave it very good ratings said they weren't really exactly sure what genre to piece it in, and that was actually one of, it kind of going back to why it didn't ultimately sell, was because, with publishing houses and their shrinking budgets, they need to be able to clearly slot in books to certain genres. So it's not the
Yeah.
same. It's fantasy, but it's not the same fantasy as like, Aragon or sword and sorcery fantasy. So it has, I classify it as fantasy, but it's definitely, it should appeal to fans of speculative fiction in general, magic realism, and it has paranormal elements. And even though it takes place in this kind of mysterious other world, it has a 1920s, 30s vibe. So anyone who's into that time period of historical fantasy fiction should definitely, I would think you would definitely enjoy too, because it has that kind of Great Gatsby vibe along with Titanic, but also elements of kind of like the Midnight Library and things like that, of kind of, asking different questions and things similar. So even now in describing it, it's kind of hard to put it in one box, but I think that is one of its strengths too.
Yeah, yeah. I think that and there I love how brave you're being of not conforming to like, okay, I need to rewrite it in just this genre. I need to rewrite it
Mhm.
in just a mystery, or I need to rewrite it in just a fantasy adventure. Like I love when people know the story that they're telling and they know it so well that they're able to stand by it even though people don't believe that it can be marketed like that. Like and
Right.
I think like more of what you said is that the shrinking budgets for the publishing houses and the fear of like, well, I don't know how to sell this. I don't know how to market this. But you do. You do it very well,
Right.
especially talking about it
Oh, thank
because
you.
yeah, because it's your baby. It's like you're
Right.
passionate about it. So I love that, Caitlin and Sam, that you are not letting anyone tell you that your story should be something different than what you believe it is.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think it's one of those things. I mean, it felt as polished as it possibly could be going out. That's why I was confident in launching it, because again, I'd worked with, I had one agent, and then it was originally young adult, and then I worked with a second agent, and basically there was an international agent involved there too, and her assistant, so it was kind of three agents. So multiple people read this, and it has been, as polished as it possibly is going to be. But again, like you said, I mean, I wasn't going to, I think to make it fit in a genre, I could have gone more in the like horror version, or I could have gone more in the Caraval, like more fantastical, which, is one of the comp titles too. So any Stephanie Garber fans, I think, would like it. But it's also, I didn't want to compromise the story, which is, to fit it in a clear genre. I think you would have to really change a lot of stuff in a certain way, and that's just not that just it's like, it's one of the, after all those years of facing rejections, I think psychologically it was, oh, the next book's going to be the big break, or the next one. And it was, I think the shipbook, I think, was the sixth one, to the point where it was of the level that I finally had to put my foot down and was like, I think it really deserves to be out there. It really deserves to be seen. It's been revised. I'm really proud of it. And I'm,
Yeah.
not willing to, put it in a drawer. And, so that was kind of the line in the sand, was the faded, which is why I felt confident enough to launch it.
Yeah. So what's next for you after now you've got this launched? Is there any new projects that you're working on or what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I have a queue going, so I'm excited. I may release later this year a novella based kind of on my own telling of the story of the phoenix. The phoenix is my favorite mythological bird. I just love what it represents. I love dragons too, and I love how dragons, have that kind of, they have the kind of more, I guess, strength and things behind it. But I love the phoenix's power and that, she's reborn from the ashes. So I wanted to kind of explore that more. So that novella may be released later this year. And I am trying to work to incorporate some artistic elements to it to make it more of an experience, on the page as well. So yeah, and then I'm working on novella for possibly next year. And then I swear I will write novels again. I'm working on a duology too. The first book was actually revised by my other agent too. At the second book's just I want to give myself plenty of time because I'm not a super fast writer. So that may look like it maybe 2027, but I'm super excited for that duology because that is very Spirited Away, Studio Ghibli. It has to deal with spirits and gods on an
Yay.
island. So I'm very excited for that one.
That's so cool. I love hearing authors and like all of the things that they have coming up because I just that's me getting a glimpse to your future, right? We might not be able to have
Yeah.
this conversation again or be able to have and I love that in this moment I get to see a little glimpse of like what's coming next for you.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I've already made my official like kind of publishing schedule, which can change, but it was kind of interesting writing out all the years, 2026 and 27, and writing all that. So yeah, it's definitely exciting stuff.
So, where can listeners find The Faded?
Yeah, so you can find the Faded on, you can just go to my website, katelynsam.com. I have a page that lists where it's available. It's right now it's only available in paperback on Amazon, but it is available in ebook on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Apple Books, all of those others, and that's you can all find that on my website. I am working to go through Ingram Spark and be able to make it available at, independent bookstores. I actually have a independent bookstore event coming up soon too. So I'm trying to Ingram is a whole new kind of thing, but I'm trying to get that uploaded as well, kind of to make it a slower kind of rollout. But I'll definitely, my website and my Instagram is at underscore Caitlin Sam underscore, and that I will definitely make an announcement of when it's available in bookstores, when it should be available in libraries too. So I'd say my Instagram is kind of the second or probably actually the first place of where you get, kind of live updates, and then I carry those updates over to my website. And I'm on TikTok and Substack too, but let's say Instagram is my main platform right now.
Awesome. You were fantastic, Caitlin Sam. This was such a good conversation and I love being able to talk to because we've talked multiple times about your book now and having you on the
Yeah.
L3 event and I just love building the community of like I can't wait to watch as this continues to grow and see where you go with all this.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And thanks so much for hosting the L3 event as well. That was great to participate. And then having me on the podcast, Randy.
Of course. All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of L3. Make sure to like, follow, and review this episode. Have a good one.
Bye.
Hey guys, thanks for joining us on this episode of Lemon's Listening Library. Remember, every story has a journey, and every journey deserves to be heard. Keep reading, keep writing, and keep listening.